Hello, comrades, and welcome back to Ushanka Show. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи. В эфире программа Ushanka Show. So recently I got an email from one of my subscribers, and I'm not gonna read the whole thing. You're welcome to pause this video and read it. So it goes, Hey Sergey, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to write you to see if you have done or cover a video on birth control in the Soviet Union. I did not. This is why I'm recording this video. I was watching another YouTube channel by Peter Zignon, and I was shocked to learn of the number of Eastern European women who have had multiple 8 or more abortions in their lifetime. I wanted to better understand the root of that. So this is what I'm going to talk about today, birth control in the Soviet Union. But before we begin, I would like to make this important public announcement. When I was growing up in the Soviet Union, I didn't care at all about birth control because myself, I had these amazing birth control glasses, so-called BSGs. So when the Soviet Union collapsed back in December of 1991, I was still a virgin. Also, I would like to say a couple of words about Peter Zhan or Zhan. I'm not sure how to say his name correctly. He has quite a few interesting videos, and I was very impressed because back in 2015, he predicted that Russia would attack, like full-blown attack on Ukraine no later than 2022 due to severe demographic problems in Russia itself. And that 2022, that was the last year they had plenty of soldiers to do this job. So I would strongly recommend to look at his videos on YouTube, Peter Zhan. And now, once again, back to the topic of birth control in the Soviet Union. If we look at the history of birth control in Soviet Union, it was quite a wild ride. If we look back all the way to the Tsar Russia, abortions were illegal. Several years after October Revolution of 1917, Lenin legalized abortions back in 1920. Then Comrade Stalin banned abortions in 1936, and abortions were illegal all the way till 1955, so for almost 20 years. And although it's not related to the topic of birth control, but I have to mention this, between 1947 and 1953, Stalin also banned marriages to foreigners, so no Soviet citizen was allowed to marry a foreigner. So as you see, Nikita Khrushchev not only removed Stalin from the Lenin's mausoleum, he also canceled a lot of his laws. He allowed women to have abortions. He allowed Soviet citizens to marry foreigners. So if you think about the birth control, it consists of two parts, prevention and intervention. So intervention will be abortions. But let's talk right now about preventions. So using the condom. So boys and girls, let's start with a quick lesson of the Russian language. Урок русского языка. The Russian word for condom is презерватив. Презерватив. And you may recognize this word. It definitely sounds like preservative. So it's basically a word preservative taken into Russian language. And it makes a lot of situations kind of awkward if you talk about, for example, American mayonnaise and you say, well, it has a long shelf life because it has a lot of preservatives in it. And I don't want any condoms in my mayo. But in Russian language, we also have a, I could say, rude word for the condom, and it sounds like Gandon. Gandon. And you may recognize a word condom that traveled into the Russian language, slightly molested, and turned from condom into Gandon. Gandon. Fun fact, a Russian word Gandon also is being used to describe a person who acts like a real a-hole. So you can call him, well, on Gandon редкий. He is one kind of an a-hole. Gandon. The main producer of the Soviet condoms was Bakovsky Zavod резиновых изделий. So it can be translated like a factory of rubber products from Bakovsk. And they produce condoms in packs of 2 for 2 kopecks each. And official name was изделие номер 2, item number 2. And some of you may ask, why was it called item number 2? It's a great question, because this factory also produced other rubber goods. Item number 1 was the gas mask. And item number 3 were rubber galoshes. For reasons I described earlier, I never used Soviet condoms, but sounds like that product was pretty crappy quality. The rubber was pretty thick and they didn't hold up really well, so there were a lot of Soviet kids that walk in on North right now because Soviet condoms failed their parents. And as I mentioned, Soviet condoms were sold in a pack of 2, and in order for the rubber not to stick together, they used talc on those condoms. So you can imagine if anybody used condoms, not lubricated ones, but the one with talc applied to it, it's really not a pleasant experience to put that one on. So no wonder that Soviet Casanovas and generally Soviet men didn't like to use condoms. And I remember those expressions like having sex in a condom is like sniffing flowers while wearing a gas mask, or having sex with the condom is same thing as taking a shower while you're wearing a three-piece suit. It's kind of you taking a shower, but you're not really enjoying it. Condoms were sold only in the drugstores, so-called apteka, and I need to make a video about Soviet aptekas. And people were kind of shy to ask for condoms, so they would ask, they would like to buy изделие номер 2, item number 2, and the pharmaceutical person would know that they're asking for condoms. Another problem with the Soviet condoms, okay, mostly probably with the Soviet men, that condoms were considered as the device to protect yourself from STD, not as a birth control. So a lot of married men considered there is no reason to wear a condom with your wife because you're not going to get STD. And also there was a lot of stigma. I think that's the correct word. I found a story. So one lady witnessed the account that a young lady was purchasing condoms at the drugstore, and the sales clerk told her, "Aren't you ashamed to buy condoms? You're a lady." And the lady replied, "Well, I'm married." And so what? It's still shameful for you to purchase condoms. But since Soviet condoms were sold not lubricated but extremely dry, they had a lot of interesting usages. For example, some people repaired their cassette players with the condoms. They used Soviet condoms, cut in proper size as a rubber belt replacement. Also, people who did a lot of camping claim that the best storage for your matches or dry fuel pellets were Soviet condoms. Sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, the Soviet Union began importing condoms from India, and those were like space technology. Once again, I never used them personally, but people claim that when they tried lubricated Indian condoms, they were amazed. Usually, they were like 3 to 5 rubles each on the black market, comparing with 2 kopecks for the Soviet Gandon, but they were so much better that some people actually tried to wash them to reuse them. And I actually remember playing with Indian condoms as a kid. When I was in the village with my friends, Dima, one of my friends, his mother worked at the local drugstore, and she had some Indian condoms that, of course, they didn't put them in the open sales. They kept them only for friends, and some of them got expired. Another method of birth control in the Soviet Union was so-called spiral. I have no idea how that works, but it was like maybe silver or copper spiral was installed inside of the woman's vagina, and it somehow would stop her from getting pregnant. Those were hard to get, could be installed only using blood, like special connections or friendships. They had quite a bit of side effects. Some of them still failed and women got pregnant, and some would just will have a growth around it, so almost like becoming the part of the female body. So that was another way is installing so-called spiralka. All right, let's talk about abortions now. So when I started researching for this topic, I found confirmation that Peter Zenon was correct. And number 8, although I don't know how many of you were shocked when you heard the number 8 abortions in a lifetime, wasn't the lowest number. When I started researching this topic, and there's quite a few on the Russian Facebook, some lady mentioned that she knew some lady at work who was 30 8 years old, and she performed 36 abortions, being a married woman. So it's pretty much if she started having sex at the age of 20, that meant she had abortion every 3 months. So when I read those stories on Facebook, I was truly horrified because there was pretty much like, yeah, my grandma had 4 kids and 6 abortions. My aunt had 3 kids and 13 abortions. So that was just a normal way of being in marriage. You have kids when you decided you want to have a kid, otherwise you just do abortions on a regular basis. Apparently there were no specialized abortion clinics. It was done in the same clinic that people came to give birth, so-called birth houses, родильные дома. And some lady said when she was given birth, they said they had 6 beds in the room, and 2 beds were dedicated to the women who were doing abortions. So they would arrive in the evening. In the morning, before they will go on a procedure, they will be forced to clean the room. So that was like punishing women, I guess, or something. So they will be, instead of cleaning ladies, the ladies that came for abortions will wash the floors. Then they perform the procedure and they just leave. Some women mentioned that if you want to have abortion done right with anesthesia and drugs, it was a good idea to pay a doctor 25 rubles. Otherwise, it will be done with no drugs. You have to bring your own bed in. So once again, free medical service, but you better pay some money. Some women thought that abortion's actually a good procedure for women because every time a woman gets pregnant, her body gets renewed and becomes younger, which sounds extremely weird, but that was one of these ideas about abortions that actually it's a good thing for women to do on a regular basis. Also, if the medical examination of pregnant woman will show that her baby has any kind of defects, it was right away recommended to get an abortion, because why would you want to get into trouble raising a handicapped kid? For some women, abortions were such a routine thing. I said that's married women, not the ones just going to the bars and getting pregnant from random dudes, that they were calling бегать на чистки. So it's not getting abortions, just gonna go for a quick run to get cleaned up. And a lot of doctors didn't call it abortions, they just called it вычистка, like cleaning. But when I was reading all these horrifying accounts, women explaining how their abortions went for them or sharing stories from their relatives that had so many abortions in their lives, like 10 times, 18 times. As I mentioned, the record was 38 abortions. I couldn't believe my eyes because no one claimed whose fault it was. They never said, because you can't get pregnant by watching TV. You can only get pregnant when you have sex with your husband. So the fact that it was totally normal that your husband is constantly getting you pregnant and doesn't do anything about it to stop it, except sending you to get another abortion, I was really shocked. There was just this culture in the Soviet Union on both sides that men considered that, yeah, he's just having fun in the bedroom, if they had a bedroom, but that's a women problem if she gets pregnant and she needs to take care of herself. A guy just considered, yeah, she's my wife, so I'm having sex and I don't bother to use condom or pull out or whatever. It was always a women's problem. Of course, such a horrific situation with the abortions in the Soviet Union creates a lot of questions. Why? First of all, why did Nikita Khrushchev legalized abortions back in 1955? And there are quite a few conspiracy theories, but Nikita wanted to destroy Soviet Union to make population collapse. But most people agree that women were dying by thousands performing illegal abortions. A lot of them also, the ones that survived, they couldn't have kids anymore. So in order to stop illegal, those kind of botched abortions, Nikita Khrushchev decided to make it legal, which I think it's a good idea. And of course, the second question, why did women didn't want to have kids? And that's, of course, I would say main reason is the housing situation, because if you live in a large city, our apartments were tiny. Usually people had 1 or 2 room apartment, not 1 or 2 bedrooms, just generally just 1 or 2 rooms. Then, of course, plus kitchen and bathroom. So due to housing situation, just having more than 1 or 2 kids was way too many. So once they have 1 or 2 kids, the rest will be aborted. And the average number of abortions in the Soviet Union in the 70s, the 80s was around 7 million per year. So for the population around 240 million people, 7 million abortions per year, it's a huge number. And of course, I could also blame the lack of sex education in Soviet schools or colleges. We had nothing like that. But of course, when you turn 16, 17, you probably could learn on the streets how the women get pregnant. But I think the main reason was just the problem with the housing situation and just general culture of the Soviet men that cared less about their wives or their girlfriends. Okay, my friends, it's all I have for you today. It's all I have for the topic of the abortions in Soviet Union. If you watched this episode all the way to the end, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.